If you have a 1-cent coin in your hand right now, stop for a second, because what you are holding might look worthless. But in the world of collectors, even a single penny can hide a shocking secret that most people completely ignore, and today you're going to find out why. If you have this coin sitting in your pocket, wallet, or even in an old jar at home, you might want to stop everything you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear could completely change the way you look at a simple penny forever. Most people walk past pennies every single day without a second thought. They drop them, ignore them, or even refuse them as change. But what if I told you that one specific penny, the 2017 D 1-cent coin, has caught the attention of serious collectors around the world, and in rare cases, it has been linked with values that can reach into the thousands, and for exceptional error examples, even far higher. Now, before you assume it's just another ordinary coin story, stay with this carefully. Because the truth is, this small copper-colored coin carries more detail, more history, and more hidden potential than almost anyone realizes. The story of the 2017 D penny begins at the United States Mint, where millions upon millions of coins were struck in Denver that year. Each coin was produced under strict conditions, with machines pressing metal blanks into the familiar Lincoln cent design. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. You see Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front, calm and steady as always, representing honesty and strength. On the back, the shield design stands firm, symbolizing unity and national purpose. But in the world of coin collecting, what looks normal on the surface can sometimes hide something extraordinary underneath. Collectors don't just look at coins. They study them. They inspect every line, every letter, every tiny imperfection that most people would never notice. And this is where the 2017 D penny starts to become interesting. Because while most of these coins are common, a small number entered circulation with subtle variations. Some have minor minting errors. Some have unusual strike details. And some exist in such perfect, uncirculated condition that they become highly desirable to collectors who are willing to pay serious money for quality and rarity. Now imagine this for a moment. A coin that originally had a face value of just 1 cent, passing through countless hands, ignored by most, until one day, someone notices something different about it. The color is sharper. The strike is cleaner. Or maybe there is a tiny mint error that makes it stand out from millions of others. That is where the real excitement begins. Because in the coin collecting world, rarity is everything. It is not just about age. It is not just about appearance. It is about uniqueness. And when a coin is unique enough, it stops being just money and starts becoming history you can hold in your hand. The 2017 D 1-cent coin is part of the modern Lincoln Shield series, which began in 2010. This design replaced the older wheat ears reverse and introduced a stronger symbolic image of the Union Shield. Each detail on this coin was carefully chosen, from the 13 vertical stripes representing unity among states, to the single horizontal bar symbolizing federal support. But here is where things get interesting for collectors. Modern coins like this are often assumed to be too new to have value. People think only old coins matter. But that is one of the biggest mistakes beginners make in numismatics. Even modern coins can become valuable if they meet certain conditions: low mintage, high-grade preservation, or minting errors that make them stand out. And yes, some 2017 D pennies with rare characteristics have been examined and graded by professional services, and in specific cases, collectors have shown strong demand that pushes their value far beyond face value. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where everything changes. A coin that has been scratched, worn, or damaged might still only be worth 1 cent. But a coin that is in pristine, uncirculated condition, especially one that has been preserved in mint state quality, can jump dramatically in value. Collectors and grading companies look at every detail under high magnification. Even the smallest imperfections can determine whether a coin is ordinary or exceptional. And if a mint error is present, the story becomes even more intense. Errors can happen in many ways. Sometimes a coin is struck slightly off-center. Sometimes the metal planchet is flawed. Sometimes doubling occurs in the letters or numbers due to a misalignment in the striking process. These mistakes are not supposed to happen, which is exactly why collectors love them. Because in a world of billions of perfect coins, imperfection becomes rare, and rarity creates demand. That demand is what drives prices up. There have been cases in modern U.S. coinage where error pennies or high-grade specimens have sold for hundreds, thousands, and in extremely rare situations, even more when competition among collectors becomes intense. So when people hear about a 2017 D penny potentially reaching values like tens of thousands in exceptional cases, it is not because every coin is worth that much, but because the right combination of condition, grading, and rarity can turn an ordinary-looking coin into something extraordinary. Now imagine this scenario again. You check your change. You find a penny dated 2017. It has a D mint mark, meaning it was struck in Denver. At first, it looks normal, but something tells you to look closer. You compare it with others. You inspect the details, and suddenly you realize it is different. Sharper strike, perfect condition, maybe even a rare error. That single moment of observation could be the difference between 1 cent and something far more significant. This is why collectors always say never underestimate pocket change, because treasures are not always buried in the ground or locked in museums. Sometimes, they are sitting quietly in everyday circulation, waiting for the right person to notice them. The emotional side of coin collecting is just as powerful as the financial side. There is a thrill in discovery, a sense of uncovering something hidden in plain sight. And that is what keeps collectors searching through rolls of coins, jars of pennies, and old collections passed down through families. But here is the final truth you need to understand. Not every 2017 D penny is valuable. In fact, most are still worth exactly 1 cent. The real value comes from rarity, condition, and demand among collectors. However, the possibility is what makes it exciting. Because even a small chance of finding something rare is enough to make people take a second look. And in rare, exceptional cases, verified by grading standards and collector markets, certain error coins and high-grade specimens have been known to reach values that surprise even experienced collectors, sometimes climbing into the thousands or more depending on demand. So if you ever come across a 2017 D 1 cent coin, don't just ignore it. Take a moment. Look closely. Check its condition. Because you never know what might be hiding in plain sight. What looks like a simple penny today could be a forgotten piece of hidden value waiting to be discovered by someone patient enough to notice it. And that is exactly what makes coin collecting not just a hobby, but a real-life treasure hunt happening every single day. If you have a 1996 1-cent coin in your hand right now, don't just put it back in your pocket and forget about it. Because what looks like one of the most ordinary pennies in modern circulation might actually have a story hidden inside it that most people never take the time to notice. Every day, millions of coins pass through hands without a second glance. People buy coffee, pay for transport, receive change from shops, and those small copper-colored pennies just keep moving, unnoticed, ignored, forgotten. But the 1996 1-cent coin is part of a generation that quietly carries more interest than most people realize, especially when you start looking at it the right way. Back in 1996, the United States Mint was producing massive quantities of Lincoln cents. The design was already familiar to the public. Abraham Lincoln's portrait on the front, calm and serious, representing leadership and history. On the back, the Lincoln Memorial still stood proudly at that time, a design that had been used for decades before the later design changes came in 2009. At first glance, nothing about the 1996 penny seems special. It was made in huge numbers. It circulated widely. It still shows up in everyday change even today. But here is the part most people miss. In coin collecting, common does not always mean worthless, and modern does not always mean ordinary. Because within every large production year, there are always small secrets hidden inside the minting process. The 1996 penny was struck at multiple U.S. mint facilities, including Philadelphia and Denver. That means you will often see a small letter under the date. Either a P is implied for Philadelphia or a D for Denver. Most people don't even notice this detail, but collectors pay close attention to it, because mint location can sometimes affect rarity, condition quality, and long-term value. Now let's talk about something important: condition. If your 1996 penny looks worn, scratched, or heavily circulated, then in most cases it is still worth face value. But if you ever find one that looks unusually clean, sharp, and untouched by time, then you might be holding something closer to what collectors call uncirculated or mint state condition. And that changes everything in the world of coins. Collectors and grading experts look at coins under magnification. They examine the tiniest details, the sharpness of Lincoln's hair, the clarity of the lettering, the texture of the fields around the design. Even a slight improvement in condition can separate a normal penny from one that is worth significantly more to the right buyer. But condition is only one part of the story. The real excitement begins when we talk about mint errors. Because even in a highly controlled minting environment like the US Mint, mistakes still happen. And when they do, those mistakes can turn an ordinary coin into a collectible. Some 1996 pennies may show slight doubling in the text or numbers. This is called a double die effect, where the design appears slightly duplicated due to a misalignment during the striking process. In other cases, you might find off-center strikes, where the image is not perfectly aligned in the middle of the coin. Sometimes the coin might have weak strikes, where certain details did not fully transfer from the die. These errors are not supposed to exist. That is exactly why collectors find them interesting. Because rarity is not just about age. It is about uniqueness. Now imagine holding a coin that passed through industrial minting machines, millions of identical pieces being produced, and yours is slightly different. Just slightly off. Just enough to make it stand out. That small difference is what turns curiosity into value. However, it is important to be realistic here. Not every error increases value dramatically. Most 1996 pennies with minor imperfections still remain very affordable. But certain combinations of condition and verified mint errors can attract strong interest from collectors, especially those who specialize in Lincoln cents. There is also another factor that matters deeply in modern coin collecting, and that is preservation. A 1996 penny that has been stored carefully for decades, never touched by heavy circulation, kept in clean condition without scratches or corrosion, can be far more desirable than one that has been used in everyday transactions. That's because collectors love coins that look like they were just minted yesterday, even if they are decades old. And here is something most people don't realize. Coin collecting is not always about finding something rare in the traditional sense. Sometimes it is about finding something better preserved than usual. Sometimes it is about quality, not just rarity. Now think about your own pocket change. How many 1996 pennies have you seen and ignored over the years? Probably hundreds, maybe thousands. But have you ever stopped to actually inspect one closely? Have you checked if the details are sharp? Have you looked for unusual spacing in the letters? Have you checked for doubling or striking errors? Most people never do. And that is exactly why discoveries still happen. Even coins from the 1990s, which seem recent, can sometimes surprise collectors when they are found in exceptional condition or with rare mint characteristics. It is not common, but it is possible. This is what keeps the hobby alive. The idea that something so small, so ordinary, can still hide something unexpected. There is also a psychological side to coin collecting that makes it fascinating. It changes the way you look at everyday life. Suddenly, pocket change is no longer just money. It becomes a potential discovery, a small mystery, a physical piece of history that has traveled through countless hands. The 1996 penny is especially interesting because it sits in a transitional era of modern coinage. It represents the late period of the Lincoln Memorial reverse design, before the series changed in the 2000s. That makes it part of a long-running historical timeline, connecting older generations of coins with newer ones still in circulation today. So while most 1996 pennies will never be worth more than 1 cent in practical use, their real value lies in what they represent and what you might find if you take the time to look closely. Because in rare situations, when condition is exceptional and when mint errors are present and verified, collectors may be willing to pay more for pieces that stand out from the standard production run. Not because the coin is magically different in face value, but because it becomes desirable within a very specific collector market. And that is the key point most beginners miss. Value in coins is not fixed. It is created by demand, rarity, and condition working together at the same time. So the next time you come across a 1996 1-cent coin, don't just toss it aside. Hold it for a moment. Look at it under light. Pay attention to details most people ignore. Because while the chances are small, the possibility of finding something unusual is always there. And that possibility is exactly what turns ordinary pennies into one of the most searched and collected coins in modern numismatics. In the end, it is not just about whether your 1996 penny is valuable or not. It is about learning to see value where others don't even bother to look. If you have a 1964 D 1-cent coin in your hand right now, don't just ignore it, don't just toss it aside, because what looks like an ordinary old penny might actually connect you to one of the most important eras in American coin history. Most people think pennies are worthless. Something you see on the ground, something you drop in a jar, something you forget about completely. But coins like the 1964 D cent carry a hidden story that goes far beyond their face value. A story of history, transition, and in some cases, surprising collector demand. Let's go back in time for a moment. In 1964, the United States was going through a powerful period of change. The economy was strong, coin production was extremely high, and the U.S. Mint was striking coins in massive numbers to keep up with circulation demand. That year alone, billions of coins were produced, including the Lincoln cent that we are talking about today. The 1964 D penny was minted in Denver, and like all Lincoln cents of that time, it features Abraham Lincoln on the front, a symbol of leadership and unity. On the back, you would still see the classic Lincoln Memorial design, a design that carried American coinage for decades. At first glance, there is nothing unusual here. It looks like every other old penny from the 1960s. But here's where things start to become interesting for collectors. Because in the world of coin collecting, age alone is not what creates value. It is rarity, condition, and demand. And the 1964 D penny sits in a very important position in numismatic history. It comes from an era just before major changes in U.S. coin production. It was struck during a time when the mint was still transitioning through different metal compositions and dealing with huge production demands. This means coins from this period can sometimes show variations, weak strikes, or interesting minting characteristics that collectors pay attention to. Now let's talk about condition, because this is where most of the value discussion begins. If your 1964 D penny is heavily circulated, scratched, or worn down, then it is usually still just a regular cent. But if you happen to find one that looks unusually sharp, with strong details and minimal wear, then you might be looking at a coin that collectors describe as high grade or mint state. And in coin collecting, condition can completely change perception. Collectors examine every detail under magnification. They look at Lincoln's portrait, the sharpness of the lettering, the clarity of the memorial columns on the reverse. Even tiny differences in surface quality can influence desirability. But there is another layer that makes coins like the 1964 D interesting, and that is mint variation and errors. Even though the U.S. Mint has strict quality control, mistakes still happen. Coins can be struck slightly off-center. Some can show doubling in letters or numbers, known as double die effects. Others may have weak strikes where certain details are not fully impressed into the coin. These are not planned features. They are accidental. And in collecting, accidents often become valuable. Because when something is rare and different from the standard production, collectors take notice. Now imagine this scenario. You are going through an old collection or maybe just checking pocket change. You see a 1964 D penny. At first, it looks normal, but then you look closer. The strike looks unusually sharp. The surface is cleaner than expected. Maybe there is a subtle variation that sets it apart from the rest. That moment of recognition is exactly what coin collectors live for. Because hidden inside ordinary-looking coins, there are sometimes small details that separate common pieces from collectible ones. Now let's be clear about something important. Most 1964 D pennies are not rare in the sense of extreme value. Millions were made, and most are still only worth face value or slightly above in circulated condition. But the collector market does not always follow simple rules. It reacts to quality, preservation, and specific varieties. That means a coin in exceptional condition, especially one that has been carefully preserved for decades, can attract attention from collectors who specialize in Lincoln cents and mid-20th century U.S. coinage. And when demand meets quality, prices can rise. This is why professional grading exists. Companies evaluate coins based on strict standards, assigning grades that determine how close a coin is to its original mint condition. A small difference in grade can sometimes mean a large difference in value. But beyond grading and numbers, there is something deeper happening here. Coins like the 1964 D penny are pieces of history you can physically hold. They passed through countless hands. They existed during a completely different era of everyday life. They are silent witnesses to decades of change. And that is part of their appeal. Now think about how many times you've seen pennies from the 1960s and never paid attention. They are still out there, still circulating, still sitting in jars, drawers, and old boxes in homes across the world. Most people don't look closely, and that is exactly why discoveries still happen. Even coins that seem common can sometimes surprise people when they are properly examined. So if you ever come across a 1964 1-cent coin, don't dismiss it instantly. Take a moment. Look at the details. Check its condition. Notice the strike quality. See if anything stands out. Because in the world of coin collecting, the difference between ordinary and collectible is often found in the smallest details. And while most of these pennies will remain simple 1-cent pieces in everyday use, the possibility of finding something better preserved, something unusual, or something with collector appeal is always there. That possibility is what keeps people searching. That curiosity is what turns pocket change into a treasure hunt. And that is exactly why even a small coin like the 1964 penny continues to attract attention decades after it was minted, because sometimes history doesn't stay in museums. Sometimes it stays in your pocket.